I'd like to welcome you to our August 2019 Contemplative Education Webinar, a dialogue on self-compassion and interdependence with Dr. Kamilah Majied and Dr. Vaishali Mamgain. Today's webinar will be a dialogue without a PowerPoint presentation. Now I'd like to give you a little background about our presenters. Dr. Kamilah Majied is a mental health therapist, professor, and internationally engaged consultant on contemplative pedagogy. She has practiced and taught Buddhism and mindfulness practice from several perspectives, including mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, mindfulness and racial justice, Buddhism and mental health, and mindfulness practices to preserve the environment. Kamilah served as a panelist for the Buddhist Teachers of African Descent Community Forum in Harlem, New York, and she is author of the article entitled Black Bodhisattvas, published in Lion's Roar magazine. Drawing from over 40 years of contemplative practice and social justice activism, Kamilah engages practitioners in experiencing wonder, humor, and insight as we release oppressive patterns and deepen our relationships with each other and the natural world. Dr. Vaishali Mamgain is an economist and leading thinker and practitioner in the field of contemplative education and compassion cultivation. As the director of the Bertha Crossley Ball Center for Compassion at the University of Southern Maine, she is a woman of color who leads weekly practice sessions and weekend workshops for mostly European descent faculty, staff, and community in Maine. Vaishali's passion and strengths are in creating brave, caring spaces. She emphasizes that when done with integrity, our practices can unseat oppression within us and by extension in the world. Based on years of contemplative teaching, she invites participants to engage with self-compassion and joy to experience the liberatory nature of contemplative practices. We are extremely excited to have them with us today. Please welcome Kamilah and Vaishali.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Maya. And thank you to C-Mind and ACMHE for the wonderful holding space that you have created over the years for people to think about both education and seat the thinking about education in a contemplative, meditative space. The work that you do is extraordinary, and I'm deeply grateful, as I'm sure many others. And thank you to everyone who's here today on a Friday afternoon with us. It's deeply appreciated on many levels that you took some time to be with us as we explore this topic of compassion and interdependence together. And it's our hope that it is a really enriching way to launch a fantastic weekend for all of us. So before we go any further, I thought I'd do something to help us land in it being in a Friday afternoon, so that Vaishali and I would like to support us all in just arriving with a brief arrival and welcome meditation. So I'll begin that now with you. So just taking a few deep diaphragmatic breaths as you settle into your seat, your chair, your cushion, your bed, your car, wherever you are in this moment. Allow the breath to help you land. Taking some long, luxurious inhalations. And equally long, extended exhalations. Filling the body, filling the mind with the breath. and allowing ourselves to land in this beautiful singular moment. Taking a moment to notice your body, your feet, your back, your neck, your head, and allowing all of you, all of your physical self to arrive here. Welcome your body to this moment. Noticing its comfort, noticing its discomfort, allowing gratitude to arise for the places where your body is comfortable, sending yourself compassion for the places where your body is hurting. Welcome your body. Our bodies are welcome. And then noticing the thoughts that come and go. With an open hand approach, we don't grasp at them, we don't push them away, just notice them. And allow your mind to be present here with the thought, with the thinking mind that's constantly flowing. We can welcome our hearts, our emotionality, our feelings, our joy, our indifference, our despair, our fear, our rage. Let's notice this magnificent heart that can feel so much, that connects to the world through the feeling. And allow our hearts to arrive and be welcome. We welcome our hearts. We welcome our minds. We welcome our bodies with deep gratitude for them. These aspects of our being. Welcome heart. Welcome mind. Welcome body. I'm grateful for you. Noticing that there are so many other hearts and minds and bodies in this moment with us. If we can send gratitude and welcome to the other hearts and minds and bodies here with us now. And then continuing to notice that our lives are porous and open and interconnected. Noticing that our ancestors are with us. Our teachers are with us. The people who stewarded the land we're on are with us. And we allow gratitude to arise for their presence with us. This particular Friday afternoon, we get to be present in deep compassion for ourselves, our bodies, our minds, our hearts, the bodies, minds, and hearts of all those with us and around us in every form that they are with us and around us. Breathing that in, with compassion for ourselves, gratitude towards ourselves. Breathing out compassion for everyone, and gratitude and welcome for everyone. Thank you.
So, thank you, Dr. Majied, for that beautiful invitation to land. And I want to thank Mind, and I want to thank all of you for arriving. And for me, you know, whenever Kamilah leads in a practice, there's always this moment where it's such a heart-opening thing for me. And I had myself muted because I start sniffling sometimes when she's leading practice. And this happened one time. We were co-leading, and she said something so powerful, so beautiful, so poignant. And here I was sniffling, you know, I was a mess. This would be fine. It was a very heart opening. Other than I had to get on right after her and speak. And so I get up to the mic, and I'm holding the mic, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a puddle. And Kamilah says, yes, but you're an empowered puddle. So I want to talk about my dear friend, Kamilah, in a moment. Before I do so, I want to just give us the structure of how this might flow. I'm going to introduce Kamilah, and Kamilah is going to introduce me. We're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to define what fierce self-compassion means, and how we define the role of the importance of interdependence. We're going to talk about intentionality and lead you through a practice of interdependent, personal. I'm sorry, I'm going to put on my headset because I hear a whooshing sound, And I want to be sure. Can folks hear me? Is the whooshing sound? I can still hear the whooshing sound. Kamilah, are you hearing the whooshing?
It's just you're stirring up the tidal forces of the universe, and they're all pushing forward.
Okay, well, we'll go with that interpretation.
The tidal forces of the universe. So we may not be able to stop the whooshing. We may have to rest in the whooshing.
All right, so let's open our heart to the whooshing. And if we hear gulls screaming in the background, that's all part of the ambiance. But let me just go through what our structure might be. And so we want to lead you in some reflections on intrapersonal compassion and interpersonal compassion. And after that, we'll leave time for your reflections and for us to have some shared co-creation of this wonderful, beautiful, vast topic that we are lucky enough to bring to life with you. So I want to talk about Kamilah, and somebody asked us recently, where did you both meet? And simultaneously we said, multiversity and Mind, because it's true. Physically and intellectually, those are spaces that, you know, are on this realm. But really, our connection is in each other's minds, and it's in a multiverse, right? So I look to Kamilah as a teacher, a mentor, a colleague, a dear, dear friend. We have so many laughs together. And really the reason we chose to do this together is because we see this great joy in acknowledging each other's fullness and holding just the most beautiful potential that this person embodies and receiving what they have to offer. And so for me, Kamilah is someone who embodies all this fullness, all this richness. Her lived life experience is so rich and so vastly different that it's actually magical that we connect. And it's really magical that any of us connect, right? When you think about what are words? What are images? It's just this, words are just breath being translated through, prana being translated to the inner channels and then coming out, and then some magical thing in our ears, outer, inner, middle, is hearing this and transmuting it, and then there's this big smile on Kamilah's face. So now, my dear Dr. Majied, I see to you, because I really say to you this, what Kamilah wears her wisdom so lightly, and she is so joyful about what she brings to the world, which is deep and profound. And it is because of her lived experience. It is because of the intersectionalities that she occupies that she has so much to offer. And it is because she loves to sing, dance, cook, eat. She loves nature. It's because she's all these things that she's the perfect person to offer this to the world, to offer the notion of exploring compassion and interdependence, fierce compassion and interdependence. I bow down to you, my dear, and I feel very lucky for you.
Thank you. I definitely feel that as well. And that's why it was so exciting when we were thinking about doing this webinar. It was like, oh, we'll just do it as a discussion. I mean, we don't need a PowerPoint. The power is in the point. And the point, really, the point is us. The point is this interdependence and the lived expression of compassion. I mean, we have developed some slides because we're academics and we do that, right? And we have some content, maybe a little of which we'll be quoting today, and we'll make that available to you. And the power is in the point, and the point is our interconnectedness and compassion. It's the point of it all. It's the point of life, and it's the conduit to it all. So, I mean, I think as we were thinking about this, the experience of knowing Vaishali has deepened my understanding of both compassion and interdependence, that the opportunity to connect with someone who is as wise as Vaishali is, and also as light as she is, that balance of levity and depth that she embodies as a teacher and as a leader and as a person, as an auntie, as a friend, as a daughter, is so full and so reflective of all of the things that resonate within me. Because one of the things we realized as we started thinking about compassion and interdependence was that our own compassion for ourselves grows exponentially to the degree that we allow our lives to be porous and experience the interdependence that already exists, and allow that interdependence to enrich our understanding of ourselves and everyone around us. So listening to Vaishali talk about anything helps me understand everything more clearly, because she has this, decades of contemplative practice herself, decades of being an educator. And also, though, she has a remarkable capacity to be humble without being self-deprecating. And from watching that, right, with awe, I also learned something about how to be more compassionate towards myself and others. So it's a constant dynamic of, self-compassion being reinforced by interdependence and compassion for another. So I could say more, and I could spend the entire webinar talking about how amazing it is for, Vaishali as a woman of Asian descent to be leading in Maine, a center for compassion, and what that involves in terms of being able to hold racism, which is just part of what you have to do, when you're a woman of the global majority leading in a predominantly white context, and also to be able to hold space for people of the global majority who are experiencing internalized depression. And just that one thing that she does with such grace and humor, I could talk about for hours, but I'll stop there to just say that the reason that we took some time to introduce each other this way was because one of the practices that we would like to offer to you around deepening your understanding of interdependence and self-compassion is noticing who in your life supports and encourages and reflects your own worth and brilliance well, right? And to whom do you reflect worth and brilliance, right? Who can look at you and see the mirror of their inherent worth? Who see a mirror of their inherent wealth. So we're going to say more about that in a little bit, but I'll pass it back to Vaishali to talk a little bit more about, I think you're going to talk about intentionality a bit here.
Yeah, and so thank you for that, because for many of us who are educators, Kamilah, you just really brought it to the point, because the mirror we are holding up, whether we're educators, whether we're activists, social organizers, whatever organization we're in, when we are actually holding up a mirror to others. Whose self-worth are we reflecting, right? And that itself is a factor of the systemic oppressions that dog are, and why give canines at that name, that really have been put into our system. So it's really a practice where constant self-awareness in bringing this to ourselves, in our personal, interpersonal things, and then in our organizational, and the roles we play in the outer world. Whose self-worth are we reflecting in what way? So this is really a practice to do this with each other and see, who do I see as my teachers? Who do I see as my teachers? That's a very good practice. So I want to just talk a little bit about the word fierce self-compassion, because the word compassion has, and particularly in the context of contemplative practice, can be mistaken to mean self-soothing. Have a compassionate day, be at the spa, right? I'm all for it. And that said, one of the things that really was very powerful to me about when Kamilah and I started talking is that these practices, these deep contemplative practices, are drawn from traditions where they are used for transformation. They're used for freedom, for liberation. And nowhere is it said that liberation or freedom is comfortable, right? No, there is nothing. So this is funny. Yesterday, Maya and Carrie and Kamilah and I were talking, and some of you who know me know that I swim in the Main Ocean, which is rather cold. And Maya said she swims in the Main Ocean as well. And Kamilah said, how cold is it? And so Maya said, well, it's like tiny little daggers all over your body. And I said, oh my God, Maya, that's a perfect metaphor for awareness, for fierce compassion. Because the way I've heard Kamilah define it is fierce compassion, fierce self-compassion is to take care of what needs to be taken care of. In the moment, it might be soothing. We need some self-soothing. We need to get a nice spa day. That's wonderful. And we're always keeping our mind vast and our intention vast. And that vastness is where we are heading. So the idea that it's tiny little daggers all over your body, because you understand, because of the nature of interdependence, our liberation is tied up with everybody else's. So fierce self-compassion, when I heard Kamilah define it, putting yourself in a situation where you can grow to the next step, where you can expand, where you can access the vastness of mind and the joy and the power and the heart that is available to us. That's fierce self-compassion.
Exactly, exactly. I'm so glad that you said that, because it's true. I think that unfortunately a lot of mindfulness practices and other contemplative practices have gotten conflated with this idea of, just I want to be more comfortable as I am, as opposed to or as contrasted to the original intent of these practices is about expansion and, experiencing more freedom. And that involves going through discomfort, not avoiding discomfort, right? So that we're not using the contemplative practice to avoid discomfort, because then we're missing half the party. We're missing almost the entire party and the entire growth process. And that fierce self-compassion, those sharp daggers are not meant to, we can think of them as kind of a way of excising toxins, right? Excising the negativity, excising the poisons, excising internalized oppression, excising privilege, excising things that hold us back. That's what we're doing when we turn towards ourselves with that fierce self-compassion. And as you said, yes, let's go get a massage. And let's go get, a breast exam, which is less enjoyable than a massage. And a profound act of fierce self-compassion. So that kind of links to the place where compassion is connected with courage, right? In order to really be compassionate towards ourselves, we've got to have a bit of courage and not just say, okay, I want to be compassionate with myself towards being complacent. I want to be compassionate with myself towards growth, so that my whole life doesn't go by and that I have experienced half of what I could, or a quarter of what I could, of myself and of my relationships and of my, power and influence and connection in the world. So yeah, let's try a practice. I want to offer a couple of reflective questions that allow us to settle into this as a inquiry that we can offer to ourselves regularly, because we both want you to have something that you can kind of take away and use. Vaishali talked about intentionality, and one of the things I often encourage is to set intentions at the beginning of the day. And perhaps you could include, because if we don't set any intentions during the day, then we are at the whims of whatever happens, and we've never had a plan, right? I mean, we often set an intention around things we want to accomplish. And the invitation that we're offering here is to set an invitation about what you want to embody, what you want to embody in terms of compassion towards yourself, and what you want to embody in the interdependent experience of compassion that's enhanced by connection and appreciation and gratitude for those around you. So setting that kind of intention as we launch into our days, we can explore this idea of the intrapersonal experience of self-compassion and interdependence with some queries. I pause and breathe a lot because I get excited.
It's wonderful. Well, it's wonderful, darling, because I just wanted to just sort of frame the intentionality that Kamilah is talking about. Interdependence and intentionality are two parts of the same thing, because once we acknowledge interdependence, that means everything we do matters. Everything we do matters. And we're very cognizant of the fact, and very humble and very grateful to our lineage, because we're both practicing Buddhists. And so, of course, the Buddhas said this 2,500 years ago. And to realize that that's the path, the interdependence, the felt connection. So when we set an intention, it is very subtly taking that entire matrix in which we are embedded. And first of all, it's bringing some awareness to it. It's bringing an awareness to the embeddedness of our embodiedness, of our mind connections. And that awareness, then we set an intention and we say, and it's like riding a bicycle, whichever way you point the handlebars, it's going that way, right? So intention is that, and there brings in the very important word that Kamilah said, courage, everyday courage. So I'm going to invite Kamilah to just pose some queries so we can rest in some of these ideas.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll just invite you to allow the queries that I offer to float through you and see what arises. And, yeah, just it's a good opportunity to just pay attention to what arises. So let's breathe in some self-reflective queries and use them as opportunities to think about how we could frame our intentions each day as we walk into the world. How will I honor my own dignity today? How might I sometimes dishonor my own dignity and worth? What can I do to honor my own dignity and worth more deeply? Who helps me see my own dignity and worth? In being fiercely compassionate towards myself, I challenge myself to grow by fill in that blank. In being fiercely compassionate towards my body, I challenge myself to in being fiercely compassionate towards my mind, I challenge myself to in being fiercely compassionate towards my heart, I challenge myself to in being fiercely compassionate towards myself, I courageously challenge myself to and however you fill in those blanks, however you answer those questions may vary each day. And if we set some intention around it every day, then we find ourselves living this more full, more emboldened and expansive intrapersonal and interpersonal experience. And Vaishali is going to talk a little bit more about how it connects to the interpersonal.
So I'll call a little bit on James Cohen's work on social baseline theory and this very simple, beautiful experiment that he did where he called in couples into a laboratory and they were able to hold hands and they looked at the image of a mountain and they were asked, and they were wearing heavy backpacks, and then they were sent to separate rooms and they were asked to rate how high is the mountain and how heavy was the backpack. And then he repeated the experiment with just people alone, no hand holding, to do the same experiment. And of course, you can guess what happened, right? The idea that people who were holding hands rated the mountain shorter and the backpacks lighter, right? So this is a wonderful validation of something that we all know intuitively, that when we feel held, there is a lightening of our loads. And this is the guiding, the landing meditation that Kamilah invited us to do, was really inviting our lineage, our friends, everybody who can support us. So when we set an intention in the morning, it can also be an invitation.
Yes.
Invitation. Please allow me to be held so I can in turn behold what it is that the world offers.
Wow. Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
And then in turn hold what is unfolding for others.
Yeah.
So there's a seamlessness of the interpersonal that it's just built in. It's just happening seamlessly all the time. So I want to say today is a very, it's a very wonderful, exciting day for Kamilah and I. Our website just went live because we're writing a book called Joyfully Just. And so the website, we've been working on the book, we're working on the website, and it just went live. And, we're telling our families and friends in different continents, and everybody's emailing, calling. And my 85-year-old mother, for the first time ever, she finds someone to tell her, help me make a video call because today I want to see my daughter's face as I tell her that I'm proud of her. And so she calls up, and when she calls up, in that moment, I'm in the middle between 3 different things, and I'm kind of running a little ragged, and she's telling me how proud she is of me, and there I can see her dear, sweet face, and I'm wanting to tell her, that's great, Ma, I gotta go. And then she says, and your friend, when you talk about compassion, right? And then she says, and your friend, Kamilah, she's so beautiful and so lively. Please convey my blessings to her and tell her I wish both of you the very best. And it was in that moment when she mentioned Kamilah that I could actually allow myself to feel her blessings. I stopped enough, oh, Mom, oh. And then because I know and share Kamilah's life stories, I know how her mother is such a dear part of her, so with her. And I was like, wow, that's Kamilah's mother talking from where the ancestors go. And so it took this interdependence between Kamilah and I in a very imperceptible, embodied way for me to allow myself to receive compassion and just a moment of wonder and holding from my own mom. And so I offer that to you, my dear sister.
Thank you so much. It's so amazing because I was equally frenzied as we were getting prepared. When Vaishali and I signed on a little bit before everyone else, and I was like, okay, da-da-da-da-da. And she was like, wait a minute. I want to tell you this story. And telling me that story helped me to land. It really helped me to land in the moment, in the morning, and in the calm, and in the reality that all is well. And it also helped me to land in, the very topic that we're talking about today, how, any loss, any pain, any absence that we might believe ourselves to be experiencing is actually corrected by allowing ourselves to engage with interdependence. So to be able to hear Vaishali's mother affirming her in this way, and all of us who have been mothers and daughters know how important affirmation is in the mother-daughter dynamic. Just hearing that happen for her and then just rejoicing myself, like, that happened for her this morning. I'm sure it happens all the time. And also noticing it happened this morning. And then for, Mother Shaylee to acknowledge me and to, as Vaishali said, and then for Vaishali to say what she said about how my mother was making her presence known. I was like, oh, of course. Yes, that's right. My mother was also making her presence known. So the whole example that Vaishali points to illustrates this piece about how our self-compassion, our capacity to even see ourselves, right? Because we have to have discernment, right? Appreciation is not just gratitude, it's discernment. It's the capacity to see. So to even see ourselves and our lives and all of what surrounds and supports us correctly, we need other people. We need these beautiful mirrors to hold up reality, to see ourselves, and then to feel the compassion towards ourselves that is reflected in everything and everyone around us. In nature itself, like Vaishali will sometimes go outside, say, Kamilah, go outside, It's like, just do something outside today. Academics, we can be at the computer all day and then at a meeting and then it's nighttime. And so she's always like reminding me to go out and play and be in nature. And so it's through these interdependent relationships that we can actually learn to be more compassionate towards ourselves, and in that compassion have more connection with everyone and everything around us. I'll share a very brief quote with you that I really like about compassion that helps adjust our notion of it. This is from Daisaku Ikeda. He says, compassion is often thought of as akin to pity, but whereas pity may be condescending, compassion springs from a sense of the equality and interconnectedness of life. Compassion is rooted in respect for the inherent dignity of life, our own and others, and a desire to see that dignity triumph. And like that, is how I feel when I'm with Vaishali, like, wow, how magnificent. How do I help this dignity triumph? And it's the intention that I set in my morning prayers as I go out to teach, as I go out to lead, as I go out to customer service. And that's the timer telling me to pay attention to time and slow down, because we've got time for questions and answers. But yes, to be intentional about everything that the practice of courage, because sometimes we're a little shy to say anything to others. Even, the relationship that Vaishali and I have developed has involved ignoring our shyness and ignoring our, the places where we get told, don't be so enthusiastic about other people. It's weird, right? That all of that requires courage to push past that. And then past those borders, there's so much freedom. And as Vaishali mentioned, that's the practice of being joyfully just that we're writing about in this book called Joyfully Just. And please go to our website, joyfullyjust.com. Know that it's a growing website and we're learning how to do it, and we can tell you much, much more about that.
So we're very happy to receive your reflections and be with whatever's arising for you. And I think Maya is going to guide us through that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you both so much. I, again, was just smiling nonstop while listening to the two of you speak. So thank you. As Vaishali and Kamilah have said, this is now the time that we'd like to open it up for your questions. So I see some coming in already, which is wonderful. And we'll just give a moment or two to submit those now. I do see a hand being raised, and I just want to say that instead of doing that, please type in your question and submit it to the questions box. I believe that's what it looks like on your screen. Okay, so just a moment or two to give folks time to submit. Okay, great. So we'll get started, but for those of you who haven't submitted your questions yet, please feel free to continue doing so as we talk. The first question that came in is, how is compassion and interdependence shared with your students in your coursework? And do you have to set boundaries?
That's a great question. You know, the boundaries are part of the compassion. You know, boundaries are a very compassionate force, right? You know, that, yeah, you know, because the wonder of interdependence is that we are all, you know, forces of nature, right? We are all embodied forces of nature, right? That's why we were hearing the whooshing, because, you know, we're just these embodied forces of nature. And because of that, we have to, you know, kind of consider, okay, how do we manage the tidal wave that is our being, right? The wave that is our being, like that's where the intentionality is important. So I think boundaries are important for everyone, and particularly as the teacher often has the power in the relationship, it's particularly important for the teacher to think, okay, well, what boundaries am I setting around my own privilege and power as I engage with students? And what boundaries am I setting to protect the dignity and autonomy and the being of the students? So I know that a lot of times when people ask this question, they think, you know, okay, maybe I should control how much compassion I show towards my students. Otherwise, I'm going to be a puddle and just be all consumed with their practices. And what I would offer is that, you know, with deep respect for people comes a respect for their capacity to handle their own lives and the wisdom to refer them to resources to support their lives if they really cannot handle their own lives. So that we get to think about boundaries as part of the compassionate endeavor, not as, you know, we have to have compassion and then put boundaries on it, that the boundaries themselves are a part of our process of compassion. Because I set this boundary of saying, for example, I teach mental health, I teach trained clinical therapists, so the natural thing is that students will come with all their, this is all the things that came up for me in class when we talked about schizophrenia, everyone in my family does. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm so appreciative that you're able to share about this with me, and we can continue to process this kind of intellectual countertransference that you're having. And you absolutely want to avail yourself of all the supports and resources there are for family members who are negotiating, you know, serious mental illness in their family, right? So it's not like setting a boundary is like, I can't handle this, you know? It's setting the boundaries like, you deserve more resource than I can give you.
Yes.
It is an act of compassion.
Thank you, Kamilah. And I just wanted to add the very important words that Kamilah used, wisdom and discernment. So these are two very, very important things that go together, wisdom and compassion, discernment and compassion, and how we define compassion. When we talk about it as interdependence, if you're talking about a syllabus, for instance, I have contemplative practices embedded in my syllabus, and I'm deeply attuned when I walk into a classroom that I have to pay attention to where students are. So if I am open enough, I will have students come to me and say, I'm of that. I've had severe trauma. I cannot engage in this. And wonderful. It's a learning. That person is exercising their boundaries and showing compassion for me and educating me. So as an educator, as a person involved in this is why having this really deep, subtle understanding of interdependence and beginner's mind. We are always, because of interdependence, we are also always in beginner's mind. So when we have the humility of saying, I actually may not know. So when Kamilah says, you deserve more resources, exactly. There is that humility that's constantly being shown us how can I offer and then let go because I may not know either?
Absolutely. And that's really important for us to do, those of us who are educators, is to let go of the facade of knowing everything, because A, it's not true, and B, we can't know everything, and there's not even any fun in knowing everything, right? That the teaching learning dynamic is intentionally that. We are always both student and teacher, and it is compassionate towards ourselves to notice our interdependence as educators with our students, right, and with our staff, that there is complete interdependence amongst us. And if we can approach everyone that we interact with that way and step out of the false hierarchy that academia establishes, where the professors are here and the students are somewhere and the staff are somewhere else, and actually see it as a circle of interdependence, then we are able to be compassionate all around in a way that is wiser and more authentic. And it requires a little courage, because our modus operandi is to step into the classroom as the authority and be the leader all the time, as opposed to having the courage to be led, right? To step into the interdependent relationship that is the student-teacher dynamic and be led by your students. It's terrifying, I can tell you. I do it all the time. And it is incredibly liberating. Our job, right? If we're brilliant, then the job of that brilliance is to shine the light on theirs, right? So that's what brilliant means, right? So that's, someone said that about me as an educator, and I was like, wow, if I'm doing that, then I'm doing the right thing, then I'm shining, then, that's the definition of being a brilliant educator, an educator who shines the light so that the brilliance of the students can show forth. And that can only happen if we're really, really respecting them, right? That quote about, how we help that dignity of triumph, how you help their dignity triumph. And part of the way we do that is to surrender the reins, so to speak, and, enjoy the interdependent learning teaching dynamic with students. And of course, get them additional supports as needed when there are challenges we can't hold.
Thank you. I think that actually began to cover some of the other questions that were coming in. I think a lot of folks are looking for specific examples of how to facilitate the self-compassion and the interdependence that you're talking about within the classroom. And some other folks asked this question about facilitating self-compassion and interdependence in their institution, institutions that are going through big changes. So if I don't know if you have some specific examples to share, but I think that would be useful.
We do. And the fun thing is, Vaishali and I have been doing trainings at lots of institutions around this, right? Around that's what the whole Joyfully Just trainings are about. And one of the things that I would do offer, is to begin with some intentionality. Let your students land and, begin with setting some intention around of raising awareness of this interdependence and of compassion as as a resource for being kind to oneself, and in so doing, kind to everyone else around you. I'll give the very brief example of when students arrive late in my class. Yes. I say, welcome. I'm so glad you made it. And students used to look at me like, don't be so sarcastic. You know what I mean? I thought I was being sarcastic, but I really meant what I was saying. And after a while, I had to just simply explain, I mean welcome, because I know that it took a lot for you to get here, right? So that's a practice, a very simple practice of, embodying compassion, kind of twisting this notion that, and then when I started doing that, people really wanted to be on time. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't mandated. There was a welcome and a recognition of people as they were arriving. So there are lots of little practices like that you can do, setting intention, doing arrival, and allowing students to land with an intention to be compassionate towards themselves in a challenging way, right? How will I challenge my mind to grow in this class? How will I challenge this assignment as a part of my personal and professional growth? Vaishali?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to say the Kamilah's thing of in saying welcome when students come in late. I've adopted it too, and the wonderful thing about it is it's a constant reminder to me to welcome disruption, because it's like one of those tiny little daggers. Right? It makes me more wakeful to see, what was happening in that student's, even in my mind, I'm processing it. What was happening in that student's life that they couldn't be on time? It's an act of very subliminal of compassion to myself and the student to engage in a different space than I am the dictator whose parade you entered. You know,
Then you come into my show late. Yeah, right.
Exactly. And when you talk about institutions, this is a very difficult practice to bring to institutions, which is why Kamilah and I work in tandem, and it takes courage, and the work begins at home. So the intentionality coupled with courage, and I want to do a shout out to all the folks who come to the weekly group that I've facilitated for 2 years. People show up. It takes all of us to show up for ourselves and for each other. So it's very difficult to mandate it, but I do know that when we set the intention and we start working with each other in the interdependence of just the groups we've been working with, magic starts happening.
Yeah, and I think the question was also about how it can happen in terms of the organization of organizations and academia as an organization, and using meetings to set intentions as opposed to just having them be about agendas, like having the first thing on the agenda be, arriving in an intention. And even if people aren't into meditation and don't want to do it in a meditative way, to even have a dialogue, right? Because dialogue can be a contemplative practice about what are our intentions towards each other organizationally, and how can we, recognizing our interdependence, whether you use that word or not, recognizing that we need each other to make this thing go, how can we be supportive of each other in a way that challenges each other to grow, and at the same time supports each other around difficulty, because that is what fierce compassion is. It means we support each other around difficulty, and we challenge each other to grow in equal parts. So you can do this, and part of what Vaishali and I teach when we do leadership trainings around this is just how you can institutionalize compassion, and how you can institutionalize, make it a part of how we run our organizations, as well as how we relate to one another and to ourselves and the world.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think we have to close. I told Vaishali and Kamilah that I'm going to download all of the questions that were submitted because there were a number that we could not get to today live, but I will share those with our wonderful facilitators so that they can continue this conversation. There were a few individuals who said that they would like the website, your website address, the
joyfullyjust.com.
Joyfullyjust.com.
Because the notion is that when we're actually just to ourselves, and it invites us to be just to others, so our liberation is tied up with everybody else's. So joyfully just.
Nice.
Yeah, joyfully just. And it's spelled JoyfullyJust.com, all one word, joyfullyjust.com. And yes.
Come hang out with us.
Yes, come hang out with us. Just sign up on the website, because that way you'll get updates about our upcoming events and notifications about sneak previews for the book, which is coming out very soon, and some of the information that we use in our trainings about it. So yeah, please, let's stay connected and keep about how we can embody both joy and justice in our compassionate and interdependent experience of one another. Just deep thank you to everyone who joined us this Friday afternoon. I feel like we're all going to have a fantastic weekend. That's the intention. I am setting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for co-creating this with us. Beautiful.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Maya. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you for letting us drop this, as the young ones say.
Yeah. Thank you both. Thank you so much. And as I said earlier to Vaishali, I usually sign off by saying thank you for sharing your work with us. But today I just feel like thanking you for sharing your joy with us, and to everyone who joined today. I do just want to quickly remind everyone that this webinar has been recorded and will be available on the website soon. And a quick note that our webinars are made possible by your support, so we invite you to make a donation and check out our extensive webinar archive at www.contemplativemind.org. While you may not be aware of it because we have such a wide reach, in actuality, the Center for Contemplative Mind is just 3 full-time staff members. So your donations make a huge difference to us, and we greatly appreciate your support. Thank you again, Vaishali and Kamilah, and thank you all who joined us. Be well and enjoy your weekend.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.